I've used a lot of axes over the years, and I thought it was probably time to put a video together about splitting axes because I use them all the time, and this is pretty much the only axe I'll ever buy again unless I hear something crazy about another one. You can see these Fisker's axes are all beat up, but they're still super solid, and that's because I use them all the time for splitting firewood. You can get these, I think, at most hardware stores. Catch them on sale. They might only be $80, and I've never broken one yet. This big one, I've got 2 of these. Had them for over 3 years, I think. This medium one, I've probably been using it for about 4 years, and I bought this itty bitty one probably 5 or 6 years ago for my kids to start a kindling business, and it's still pretty much indestructible. And that's basically all I use this little guy for, is chopping up kindling, or you know, I might use it on splitting some of this smaller wood, but it's definitely a size that you can use one-handed if you're doing some splitting. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of these axes. The wood that I'm splitting is garbage. These are all dead spruces that are all around the homestead. So I'm basically doing my bit to protect this spot from forest fires by removing this dead wood from the forest. There's been a pretty big infestation of insects that have been targeting spruce and balsam. And so if you've been watching my videos, you know that there's lots of dead ones around. I could spend the rest of my life trying to clean them all up, but I do pick away at them one at a time, especially near the house, and burn up the brush when we're not on a fire ban, and put all this junky wood away, burn it all winter to keep the house warm. So, little kindling axe, best for cedar or spruce and balsam that doesn't have quite so many knots. And it is also a handy axe to keep nearby when you just want to take off some of these little branch nubs. The medium one I bought for my kids. This is a really good size of splitting axe for a smaller person or for children, but it's still long enough that when you're using a splitting block, if you miss your piece of wood but you hit the block, you're going to be fairly unlikely to hit yourself in the shins, but that's definitely a risk. So you want to manage how you set up your splitting station so that that's not a problem. And this one's too naughty, it just doesn't want to split. But let's take a whack at this one. Maybe you know this trick too. You can sometimes flip the wood upside down and split it. This one again has a bunch of branch knots, and this was the base of the tree, so it doesn't particularly want to split, but we're going to convince it. The other nice thing about these axes is that they're very light. I'll pop it up on the screen. I don't see the weight on it, but you can swing these axes all day. They're light enough for people who aren't used to splitting, can learn on them pretty easily. They also have a fairly narrow profile, which means they don't often get too jammed in the wood, but they get a lot of bite because of that narrow profile. Now if I had some nice hard maple here, I'd be making a lot of one swing splits, but I'm really getting my exercise on all this junk spruce. And a lot of it I might use in my kitchen wood stove, so I do cut them fairly short, maybe 14 inches, and then I tend to split them into quarters rather than just into halves. I have tried a lot of different splitting mauls, wood-handled ones, Granfers Brooks. I've even used those weird ones with the wings on them that everybody raves about. They're not that great. They're just weird. And I would say after years and years of splitting firewood, these are definitely the best splitting axes that I've ever used. So I'm using the longer one now. This one's good because it's really hard to get yourself in the shins because it has a much longer shaft. It's also a fair bit heavier than the medium one, and because of the extra length, you can get a pretty good swing on it, which is devastating against maple and white birch. But the spruce is like really something else. This little one too is handy for this kind of thing where you get a split, but it's hanging on by a couple of fibers, and then you can just split that down. I do also always try and work in gloves, protect my hands, because no matter how careful you are, you're always going to get a few splinters off of the wood when you're handling it, and you don't want that. So pretty much any work glove will do. I've become really fond of these mechanic style, the thinner, lighter ones with a leather palm, but usually a breathable back. So I was at Princess Auto the other day, and I picked these up for like 10 bucks. So this is my first day wearing them, and so far they're pretty good. They're grippy, they're not too warm. I think a lot of people have a good limbing axe that they keep handy, but if you're doing any splitting, I would definitely recommend getting at least this big one of the Fiskars axes, the splitting axes, and maybe also that medium one, especially if you're trying to convince your kids to do some of your splitting work for you. Or if you've got a smaller frame, you might find that smaller one a lot less tiring to swing all day. One thing I would not do is hammer on the back of these. I don't think they're rated for that, and I also think it's kind of just bad practice. But you can flip them and do the reverse split. I've done that with these axes a whole bunch of times, and I've never broken one because I'm still using the same one that I've had for years. And also, I've been wailing away on a bunch of this garbage spruce, which, you know, the more times you have to hit the wood with the axe, the more wear and tear you're putting on your axe. But none of that's been an issue. Now I try and make the most of all my wood wastes. So another thing I do is I try and do all my splitting in one spot, and then I pick up all my bark pieces, and those become mulch in the garden. So they're going to add organic content, and they're going to keep the weeds down. They're going to help hold moisture in the soil. So I really try and make the most use of that bark as well. Anyway, there you go. There's the Papa Bear axe, the Mama Bear axe, and the Baby Bear axe. And you got the whole axe family. The only splitting axes you'll ever need. Very inexpensive for the amount of work that you'll get out of them and for how long they'll last. There's no wood, so you don't have to worry about them splintering. You shouldn't leave them outside, but I've definitely left them outside for weeks at a time, and they don't weather. I've used them at minus 30 degrees in the winter. I've used them in the hot summer and every season in between. None of that really seems to affect them. If you want to touch them up, you can easily take a file to the blade edge and keep it nice and sharp, and you'll get a lot of use out of one of these axes. So there it is. This is a multi-year review. Nothing fancy, just splitting some garbage wood. But if you're looking for a splitting axe, I would recommend one of these, hands down. Gloves down, gloves off.